The NFL draft is right around the corner, and at this point, it feels like we have a pretty good grasp on which ways the Chargers could go in the first round, but the one wild card is cornerback Will Johnson.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, Joe Ortiz already said that he will never, ever stop looking for corners. And this one right here, if he's there at 22, I'm sure there's going to be a couple of Michigan men that are going to be pounding the table to try to get Will Johnson in a Chargers uniform. So we're going to talk about that, give our insights on what we think about him as a player, and then talk about would the Chargers actually pass on one of the top tight ends if they were available there? And can the Chargers find 3 more starters after they found 4 in last year's draft?
Yeah, I think we were probably a little bit spoiled, getting 4 last year, but also it didn't start out that way. Not all those guys started from the beginning of the season, so how quickly can you get those guys along? But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And you know what today is? It is Buy or Sell Tuesday, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions. One of, if not our favorite shows of the week. We love doing it with you guys, especially getting your guys' thoughts on what you're thinking about in the big storylines and overreactions in your mind. And we have to start with this one. And I know Blue Blitz has been trying to get this one on the show for a while, and it's a good
shout out to
for
Blue
us
Blitz
to talk about a guy that, could make sense for the Chargers at 22, and you definitely know there will be conversations if he gets there. But the buy or sell is Will Johnson falls to 22. So just on the surface, I would sell that he gets there, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all, because this is also a player that has a very differing set of opinions depending on who you ask, especially as a guy who is, the narrative is much better in zone coverage than he is in man coverage, and maybe isn't a fit for all teams, and also played his best football, not last year in 2024, but in 2023. So he's Dane Brugler's 18th ranked prospect. He's CB2 behind Travis Hunter in Dane Brugler's rankings. But cornerback is a premium position, and teams will reach for one if they need one. But as far as, why the Chargers will consider him at 2020 or at 22, David, I mean, there's obviously a ton of reason for it.
Yeah, there is. I mean, when you look at, the cornerback position, you look at prototypical size, that's what Will Johnson possesses. 6'1", 194 pounds. Like that's, what you're trying to kind of get for an outside corner, a guy that you want to, have protecting the boundary. I love how physical he is in press man coverage. I felt like his strikes were able to kind of disrupt the releases of the receivers when he was put, in the position to be able to do that. I feel like he had some pretty good fluidity with his hips. He was able to flip his hips and turn and run with the receivers, which is obviously a very important aspect of that position that you have to be able to showcase that you can do. I feel like he had some good speed to be able to stay with the receivers. I didn't see him, see receivers really running away from him while, during the games that I watched. And, I did see a couple of instances where, if there's a runner trying to break away and, he was able to chase them down, be able to get them on the ground and be able to end that. Although we'll say that, that aspect of his game is probably a little bit hit and miss. I did feel like he showed really good awareness and instincts, especially, one play sticks in my mind against USC where he effectively diagnosed that there was going to be a wide receiver screen happening. He jumped that route and took it back to the house for a pick 6, which brings me to my last point. He did have good ball production in college, 9 interceptions and 19 passes defensed.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, he is a guy that makes plays on the football. He's also a guy that is super dangerous with the ball in his hands. You talked about the one he had against USC, but he had 2 picks in 2024, and both of them went into the end zone for a touchdown the other way. So 3 pick sixes, I believe, in his career, 2 last year, 1 in 2023, and 6 interceptions in his last 18 games. I mean, that's something that'll play in the NFL. It gets you about, 5 picks a season if you're doing that at the next level. So that's going to be great. And I mean, as far as why the Chargers would go this route, why take cornerback over what are more obvious needs for you? Because I think a lot of the talk has been interior offensive line or defensive line or wide receiver, finding that weapon, a pass catching tight end. The reason you would go with someone like a Will Johnson is it would give you potentially, one of the youngest, most talented cornerback rooms in the NFL for the foreseeable future. You'd have 3 guys you feel really good about because you already have 2 5th-round picks that are playing for super cheap with Cam Hart and Tarheeb Still. Now you add Will Johnson. If you think he's one of those dudes, right? If you think he has that kind of top 10 potential, now you're setting up your defense, for many years to come and giving them a definitive strength that helps everywhere else, right? Helps your pass rush, helps the other parts of your defense when you can do it. So great instincts. The fluidity in which he plays, which kind of just the smoothness, the calmness that he plays with for the most part, just kind of diagnosing things, just a true zone expert, just knows exactly where to be, knows exactly what leverage he needs to take routes away from wide receivers. You talked about the breakaway kind of going and getting someone. He had a play like that against Texas. Guy was gone, would have scored a touchdown, saved the touchdown by chasing him down. So I think that's what makes you feel good about the effort. But I think the other part of this is, and the obvious pro here is, you know exactly what you're getting, right? This is arguably the best player on the 2023 Michigan defense that was the best in the country under your defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter. We're also talking about a defensive room that they had there that's going to have, 6 or 7 day 1 or day 2 defensive picks. Mikey Samerstill, Junior Colston, obviously the guys that are going to go this year, Will Johnson, and you have Kenneth Grant, and you have Mason Graham, and you have Chris Jenkins, right? All of those dudes are all going to be day 1 or day 2 picks in the draft. Totally stacked. And this dude arguably was the best one of them in 2023 in their national championship run. I think the other thing here is you have all the intel. There shouldn't be any surprises with Will Johnson. But man, I mean, watching him this year, business decisions seem to be getting made, especially while he was tackling, because that was easily the most infuriating part of watching Will Johnson, especially this last year.
Oh my goodness, Daniel. It was so frustrating just to watch game after game after game of his just tackling or lack thereof, and the whiffs a lot in open space, going for the legs. And I didn't even look at any of the stats until after I watched all of the film, because I didn't want it to kind of taint my opinion on what I saw on film. And it matched up, at 20.8% missed tackle percentage in 2024 and a 14.5% missed tackle percentage throughout his collegiate career. So that's really high. That's just got to be something that you have to fix and you got to clean up at the next level. Also, he missed 7 games due to injury, and he missed a couple of games pretty much every season when he was in college football. And you already kind of mentioned it, the discipline on the double moves. It's something that you got to work on, especially when you're playing with, against some of the best receivers and best quarterbacks on the planet.
It's always going to be something that you deal with if you're a corner who really excels at breaking on the football and diagnosing routes and being able to jump the ball. That's why he had 6 picks in his last 18 games. And it's also what gets him beat on double moves, which can lead to not only big plays, but also penalties as well. And he didn't always pay for it. I mean, he had one against Fresno State where, it should have been an easy walk-in touchdown for the Fresno State receiver, but the quarterback just missed the throw. But you can see his instincts can play against him in those times. Now, with him, that if Jesse Minter and this regime are comfortable taking him, there's parts of these weaknesses they think he can improve on, especially the tackling, because at 14% for his career, obviously not good. A 20% season's going to skew those numbers a little bit. He was a much better tackler before this last year, but just watching the 2024 Washington game, I think back-to-back plays, one, he just gets absolutely truck-sticked. Second one, he goes for a shoulder tackle. Too much shoulder tackling just in general. I think the frustrating thing is you can see him make physical tackles. You can see him actually do it, which
inconsistent.
is kind of the pros and the cons of it, right? He can do it, but why wasn't he doing it? Because his draft stock was already made. It's kind of like Derek Stingley where, super good. If he would have came out at kind of his peak, he would be a top 10, top 15 pick. But then he kind of disappears on a bad Michigan team last year by their standards, and you forget kind of how good he was in 2023. And his tape in 2024 left a lot to be desired. So the Chargers absolutely could go this route. It's someone they're super familiar with. It's a position that's not a huge position of need, which will also be kind of one of my cons for him, right? He's not one of those Like, it just makes it that much tougher to address tight end and wide receiver and guard and edge and interior defensive line, running back. All those positions get harder if you go cornerback in round 1. But I know the Chargers will consider it. But will they consider taking him over one of the top 2 tight ends, including another Michigan man in Colston Loveland? We're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts and investments and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. One of the things I love about it, because me and my wife are both hooked up to our Monarch Money account, is just the easiness to do it together. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever, and you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. And I will let you know, all of my podcast checks disappear into my wife's bank account, so it's great to know where that money is going. And it's nice because I don't really have the time to keep up with that stuff, and Monarch Money just makes it so easy for me to get up to date quickly and keep track of all of those things. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. David, we have more great buy or sells to get into, and thank you to all the everydayers who hit us up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter, at LockedOnChargers on Instagram, and hit us up wherever you did. YouTube, the voicemail line at 323-524-7924, and all of the everydayers out there contributing however you can. But let's get to this one here, which is a great question considering the conversation that we had. A great buy or sell, I should say, from Luca Neal on Instagram, who says, buy or sell, if Will Johnson falls to pick 22, the Chargers would take him over Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. David, are you buying or selling this?
Yeah, I'm going to sell it just personally because of the positional value on the particular football team that we're talking about with the Chargers. I mean, as you
not
mentioned,
necessarily positional value more than just what their positional need is, right? Because
yeah,
obviously cornerback is a bigger positional value, but you have 2 guys you feel good about there and
exactly.
long-term guys.
Yes, and so seeing a guy like a Colston Loveland on the board there and having a Will Johnson on the board there, to me it's an easy decision because it's easier for me to see the pathway to immediate impact and also why it makes sense long term. Not that it wouldn't make sense to bring in Will Johnson long term, but I just think the impact part of it and what the Chargers need right now is a tight end that can really stretch the field, that can really be a dynamic part of your offense, which I think has been missing. So for that reason, I am going to sell the fact that they would take Will Johnson over a Colston Loveland.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really pull the Michigan connection because you could have a Colston Loveland there that was also a Michigan man.
Exactly.
So I think that we know they love corners. I believe they would take a corner at 22, even if it's not a huge need. And I think as far as like immediate impact players, like when you have a Tyler Conklin and a Will Dissly, I mean, you're probably not going to be seeing a tight end, maybe even around one tight end that's going to just jump into the spotlight and get all the snaps right away. Whereas Will Johnson might be your starter week 1 if you draft him at 22 on the outside because of, you have Tarheeb Still who can play in the slot. You have Cam Hart who can play on the outside. My biggest thing is I don't think he's a better player than those guys. I mean, at least not with the recent tape that you have. I mean, you're talking about a guy in Tyler Warren who's the 8th ranked prospect according to Dan Brugler on the Beast. Colston Loveland who's the 11th ranked prospect. And then you have Will Johnson at 18. It's not necessarily, a huge gap between those guys, but at the same time, in the first round, you're talking about a bigger need and a better player that could be available to you with those tight ends. We don't know how the Chargers have these guys graded.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem impossible that they could go with, Colston Loveland or, Will Johnson over one of these tight ends if they think they feel good about the tight ends they have right now, which they never seem to be as worried about their weapons as we are. At the same time, I mean, if you think Will Johnson's a top 10 type of corner and you know the most about him, anything can happen. I would sell it, though. I think they would still go with one of those top tight ends if they were available to them. But let's get to a theory here, because if the Chargers do go defense in round 1, especially if they go cornerback in round 1, puts you in a little bit of a predicament. Like we talked about, it makes it harder to fill all of those other needs. If they do go defense, maybe there's a run on offensive playmakers after that. Let's hear what a theory has for us this week.
Daniel, David, this is SEO Buy or Sell Tuesday Draft Edition. Buy or sell. Chargers will go defense only in round 1. Round 2, and 3, and 4, they will go playmakers. Wide receiver, running back, tight end. I'm buying it because of the press conference. What do you think? Thank you. Love you.
It's an interesting question. And I think if it wasn't 3 weapons, I might be able to buy it. Because I think that when you make it weapons, you take guard out of the equation, or at least interior offensive line of the equation.
Unless you are talking to Jim Harbaugh, obviously.
What? You know what? That's such a fair point. I rescind my former statement, actually. If we're counting interior of the offensive line, I mean, I could buy it. Like, I truly could. If it's Will Johnson specifically, I don't know if I'd buy it, though. And that's the big difference to me. Because if they pass on corner in the first round, I could see them addressing corner on day 3 and not feeling like they missed out a huge, a lot. But
yeah,
if they go defensive line in round 1, if they get like a game-wrecking, pass-rushing type of player, I could see there being 3 offensive players after that. And I don't think it's crazy, especially when you look at what they did last year, right? What happened? The first 2 picks, both offense, right? After that, they didn't pick another offensive player until round 6 when they took Kamani Vidal, right? They went in round 3, Junior Colston, in round 4, Justin Aboigbe, and they took 2 corners in the 5th round. They took 4 defensive players in a row. They will go on a run, and what did they do after that? They took 3 offensive players in a row. They took a running back, and they took 2 wide receivers in round 7. So I don't think that's crazy at all. Now, if we're talking if it's all weapons, like he's saying in this, like I don't think it's going to be wide receiver, tight end, running back after, a defense in round 1. It's not impossible, but if I had to buy or sell it, I would sell it.
Yeah, I just think it never works out that way. And you just can't go into the draft with that type of mindset, especially because there's multiple positions to address on both sides, and you just don't know how the board's going to fall. So I just think I'm going to sell it that it's going to happen that way. I mean, is equal parts that you need to address. You have edge, you have defensive line. On offense, you probably want to get a tight end, probably want to get a receiver, want to get an offensive lineman. Like, you have to see how the board works out in your favor and be able to take the best player available. And hopefully it's at one of those positions when you're up on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is defensively, if you're talking about pressing issues, the biggest one is defensive line and just not having a guy there. They have guys there. That's why, to me, if it's interior defensive line in round 1, I could absolutely see it being a run on offensive players after that, because they could take an edge rusher in round 5 or round 6. They could take a corner later. I don't know, because like the thing is you can find that future edge for you. Who's your future running back then? And who's your future, tight end at that point? You can only get so many of these guys. So if they did do that and go that direction, defense in round 1, I could see it happening. But what about the flip side? Nicholas Petrelli says, buy or sell if the Chargers select a wide receiver, tight end, or guard with their first pick of the draft. They will not select another offensive weapon until after day 2 and vice versa. So what do you think, David, flipping it over, if the Chargers do go and feel like they get that weapon potentially in round 1, could you maybe see a run on defensive players?
I just think that, for me personally, the Chargers offense needs more of the help. They need more of the impact players right away. I mean, Jesse Minter, Mike Elston, the Chargers, defensive coaching staff, Steve Clinkscale, they've already proven that they're able to develop players and get the most out of them. So I trust them a lot more with their ability to take what they have and make it work. That's because that's what they've done. On offense, there's aspects of the offense that leave a lot to be desired. And there are clear and obvious holes that still have to be addressed at this moment in time going into the draft. So I'm going to sell it.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I think if it's a guard specifically in round 1, I'm not going to rule out that they're going to take a weapon in round 2 or round 3. It feels like they would almost have to, in my opinion, just given the lack of firepower that led to their season ending last year, along with the interior of the offensive line. But if they go Colston Loveland, right? If Colston Loveland falls to them at 22, could the next 2 picks be defense? Sure. Could you try to find your edge? Like, you feel like at that point, okay, we have an offensive playmaker that can be an impact player for us this year and potentially be a top 10 type of player at his position. We feel better about the offense. We have a guy in Ladd McConkey and now Colston Loveland where we can build our offense around that, and maybe we don't need as many premium players around them. If they go guard in round 1, though, you're still dealing with all those same issues, right? Yeah. So I think that it depends which way they go in round 1. If they get a Tet McMillan and they have a Tyler Conklin and a Will Dissly already in the room at tight end, maybe they feel okay about the offense with that because they have another playmaker. So I totally get what you're saying here, Nick. And I think that if you saw them go, interior defensive line and edge rusher in round 2 and 3 because you feel like you've boosted your offense, doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. Do I think it'll happen that way? No, but I do think that if you're talking about specifically weapon and they go wide receiver in round 1, I could absolutely see them not taking another tight end or wide receiver until day 3. If that's kind of what you mean by that. But we still have much more to get into, including how many starters can the Chargers get out of this draft class? Because I think we've maintained our thought on basically, if the Chargers want to make that leap going into this year and become contenders with what they did in free agency, they're going to have to hit big on a couple more of these draft picks. And can they get 3 starters? We're going to talk about that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes it betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, which I love. But from 3-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. The Lakers are kicking off their playoff run on Saturday night against the Timberwolves, and they are currently 4.5-point favorites to win game 1. But if you didn't want to go with just the game, you could also go with the player prop. One of the ones I like, LeBron James having more than or over 32.5 combined points and assists. There's a ton of different ones like that I like doing on FanDuel. That makes it really fun. But don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. We still have some more buy or sells to get into, and thank you all for those who contributed and those obviously who are just checking out the show today as well. We appreciate the everydayers out there, and thank you for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, there's nothing better you could be making that right now than the Locked On NFL Draft Show with our guy Damian Parson along with Keith Sanchez as they keep you up to date with all the biggest draft news as we head to the draft right around the corner because it's next week all of a sudden. So super excited about that. Super stoked to keep up to date with all the draft stuff with those guys. That's really helped me, especially with having a 1-year-old running around. But
yes,
let's get to the rest of these buy or sells here, David, because we have some really good ones, including this one from John Clark, who says, I was thinking about Daniel Jeremiah's starter draft comment and that the depth of this draft could yield 3 or 4 solid players for a few teams. So buy or sell the value of coming away with 3 or 4 solid starters over the value of coming away with 1 superstar but not much else. So let's pause here for a second just to shout out John Clark, an everydayer who is battling stage 4 cancer and still finds time to listen to the show. John, your continued support and appreciation for the show does not go unnoticed at all. And we're definitely here, rooting for you as hard.
We love you, John,
as we possibly can. And, you've still been contributing so many times before we even knew all the stuff that you were going to. So the fact that you still find a way to make us part of your day means so much to us. But also just really, really good questions, really good buy or sells, including this one. And David, to me, easiest buy of the day.
Yeah.
Easiest buy of the day for me. Because the funny thing is, we've seen it the other way. We've seen plenty of Tom Telesco drafts where you get a Justin Herbert and no one else. Where you get a Rashawn Slater and it falls off. Where you get a Derwin James and nothing really else to feel great about, right? So we've seen it the other way. 100%, especially with this roster and where they're trying to get to. Give me 3 or 4 solid starters, and I'll sign off on that, even if I know none of them are going to be a star player.
Right, and I just don't. And no, it's not. I know the Chargers are not 1 superstar player away from winning a Super Bowl. That's 100%. Just the fact of the matter. They have multiple holes that they need to be able to fill with quality players. If they're able to do that, if they're able to shore up their offensive line, if they're able to grab another weapon, if they're able to get an impact player on the defensive line, whether, that's, a superstar or not, just guys that are there to make improved play, then I think you're going to see a higher, ceiling of what they're able to achieve. And so, yeah, it's such an easy buy for sure.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, is like for so many years that, it's like, hey, the Chargers have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and Derwin James. How are they not better? And the answer was simple. The difference between the Chargers star players and the rest of the starters that they're trotting out there was just so steep. And I think even that kind of caught up to them last year because there's only so much you can do in one offseason, especially taking over kind of the gnarly cap situation this team did last year with a bunch of aging contracts on the roster. the steep drop off from those guys who were undoubtedly good,
Yeah.
top players at their position, even at some points, and even on offense too. You have Justin Herbert. How come you aren't winning games?
Yeah.
How come you're not winning playoff games? Because the gap between the Justin Herberts and the Rashawn Slaters to the Trey Pipkins and, the other guys that are basically, holding the team back was just so severe and so steep. So
Yeah,
if you're
cavernous.
telling me you can add 3 to 4 solid starting players to this roster, I think the Chargers are contenders this year.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I think that's what it's going to take. And I think it's possible. But let's get to this next one from Instagram here, and Andre Montano, who says, buy or sell 3 or more rookies from this upcoming draft will start for the Chargers by week 3. We know the Chargers got 4 starters, David, but it didn't start out that way. So are you going to say buy or sell the Chargers have 3 of these guys starting by week 3?
Yeah, the one thing that's always unpredictable, I guess maybe it is predictable, is
Injuries.
the fact that injuries are going to happen every single year. But I also feel like it is very unrealistic to expect that you're going to get another 4 starters out of a draft, any draft class, no matter what that is. I just think that
Immediate starters, too,
immediate
right?
starters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, eventually, yeah. Could that happen? Absolutely. It's a long, tumultuous, very physical football season. Some of these guys are going to be put in positions to be able to step up and show what they have. But I'm going to sell it. I just think, as much as I would love to see that, I just think, expecting that type of hit rate, year over year is just something that is not really realistic in my opinion.
I think it feels different for the Chargers because you got 4 starters last year, and you had 4 starters who were playing at a really high level towards the end of the season. But it's easy to forget the fact that for the first, month, 2 months, it was really only Joe Alt and Ladd McConkey that were starting as rookies for this team. Now, you did have, Junior Colston, who did play 35 snaps week 1, but I still don't think he started because I'm pretty sure it was Deion Henley and Denzel Perriman out there for the first snap. Either way, he played starter-ish snaps for 1 game, then went on IR after the next week, and then, kind of fell off a little bit. But the other part of this is you don't have the same kind of picks you had last year. You don't have the 5th overall pick. You're not getting someone that, is going to be expected to start from you from day 1 and play really well. Like the 2 starters you had that were going from day 1, Ladd McConkey and Joe Alt, you're talking about the 5th overall pick and the 34th overall pick, a really high 2nd round pick, plus a guy who's a top 5 pick. Now, in this upcoming draft class, you have pick 22. Pick 22 is an undoubted right away starter for most teams. If you hit on it, you can. But that's not always how it works. Quentin Johnston was the 22nd pick. I mean, I think the Dolphins lost their pick, so he ended up being 21. But either way, that's the kind of caliber of player, and obviously he wasn't ready to start right away. So I'm going to sell it as well because instead of having, the 5th and the 34th overall pick, you have the 22nd pick, and you're not picking again until 55. So to think that those guys are all going to be starting, especially because, even if you take a running back, it's going to be hard to take away Najee Harris's starting job. Even if you take a tight end, you're going to have other guys who might technically be the starters there, with Will Dissly or Tyler Conklin, whoever that ends up being. So not every position, even if they take them high, is necessarily an easy path to a starting job, especially by week 3, which is what this is asking here. But let's get to one more here from Jackson. Buy or sell, the Chargers fan base will not lose their mind over this year's draft. Last year's draft has us prepared. This is one of the funnier buy or sells I've seen in a long time. David, you buying or selling it?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself and the fact that I am definitely not going to overreact this year because I got caught with my, my pants down basically last year, losing my mind
Never say
over
never.
the Joe Alt pick. And it was a really bad decision because I ended up looking horrible. And my point is you have to look at the totality of the draft, and you have to look at it from the beginning to the end before you make any emotional knee-jerk reactions like I did last year. So I am definitely going to wait and see what the whole draft looks like. But as far as the Chargers fan base, absolutely not. They're going to lose their mind no matter what. It's just people out there are going to have players that they want to get, and they're not going to get it, and they're going to be mad. That's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah, I can't think of what the most kind of universally loved pick was. Maybe Rashawn Slater. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people had a problem with that, but there's always something. There's always somebody. And I think it's going to be different this year because last year when you're talking about the 5th overall pick, especially when it was pretty clear that the top 3 teams were all going to take quarterbacks. I mean, you knew you were going to get either the 1st Yeah, basically, I mean, somebody could have traded up to 4. That was a rumor for a while. JJ McCarthy would go 4 or whatever. But you were pretty clear that you were going to get either the best or the second best player, non-quarterback division in the draft class to choose from, right? And when you had generational players like Malik Neighbors, generational prospects, it was always going to end up making somebody upset. I mean, we were, sold on Brock Bowers. We were sold on Malik Neighbors. They didn't go in that direction. And I'll say I believe you right now that you're not going to overreact if the Chargers go with some guy that we have no idea in round 1, because you absolutely will, just as we always do. And that's the thing, is I do think that this front office has done everything it can, right? Like, they've bought as much leeway as you could with the fan base. I mean, I was sitting in the Chargers facilities this time last year, and they were asking me, what do you think the fan base is going to do if we take an offensive lineman in round 1? And we weren't allowed to say anything about it, but I was like, they're going to freak out, and they're going to hate it, and they're not going to be... Maybe I should have seen the writing on the wall then, because I still, in my last mock, picked Malik Neighbors to go to them at 5. I didn't listen, when I should have. But I think the thing is here is, at 22, it's a lot different, because there's so many different ranges of outcomes.
Way more volatility.
There's probably, that being said, if a Colston Loveland or a Tyler Warren drops to 22 and the Chargers pass on him for, Gray Zabel or, one of Donovan Jackson or some random dude, everyone's still going to overreact. Now, if you stack 2 back-to-back really strong draft classes, I think the trust is going to get there, but we're talking about battle scars that go back years and years and years, and trust issues that don't get solved in one therapy session. So I think that it's come a long way. They've done about as good as they can. And we're still going to overreact if they don't take the player that we want in round 1.
Because the scars remind us that the past is real, Daniel.
And the other thing is, we're always right, and you should take the player that we want you to take. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. We did have some news that came out late today. We're thinking about talking about tomorrow, which is that the Chargers have had an official visit with maybe the top receiver in this draft class, Tet McMillan. We're going to give our thoughts on that and much more. So to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers podcast or YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcasts from, as well as finding us where everyone hit us up today with all of their buy or sells on Twitter at Locked On LAC, where we post the show every day, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page, and also calling into the voicemail line. If you want to get your Fan Mail Friday voicemail in, give us a 30-second Chargers question at 323-524-7924, because we love hearing from you guys. But fun show. We're super excited about this draft and to keep on getting into it as much as we can before the big day arrives. But thank you guys, as always, for riding with us and making us your listen every day as the only daily Chargers podcast out there. But make sure you come back tomorrow to talk about Tet McMillan visiting with the Chargers. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.